All right. So, business skills they don't teach you in design school, right? Or how designers talk to everyone else. Sometimes I like to think about it. So I appreciate everybody coming tonight and listening to me ramble on. I promise I'll try to be amusing. I promise I will answer almost every question you ask. And if not, my manager, Gavin, will take care of the rest. So thank you. Kind of kicking into it, if I can get the click to work. So who am I? I'm a pretty typical blue collar designer. I'm a guy that lives out here in Kansas. I draw pictures for a living, and I've got a wonderful family that keeps me on my toes. And yes, that dog is really, really that dumb. Um, it's kind of nice because I have a good grounding in what good grounding in what makes me want to come to work every day, but it's also a good grounding and a good space to make things and think about things. Because as I've kind of evolved as a designer, as a human now, I don't get to design as much as I once used to. So the stuff that I used to do a lot, I do a lot more of. I make things. I've always made things, and it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. So you can tell by my laboratory behind me, but that's really fun. Um, I bet many of you are wondering how I might have gotten to this moment to talk to you tonight. And that's really quite an interesting story. I have done a lot of different design. I've designed, well, I haven't designed signs, but I have installed a whole lot of signs. I want to make sure I give credit to the people that actually did design these giant things I hung out in the world. I've installed signs before. I've put them around the country and around Kansas City. For a period of time, I did actual real product design of physical, tangible things at a wonderful company here in Kansas City called Pivot International. We design medical products. We design voting equipment. We once were featured on the news, if anybody is old enough to remember Dan Rather. We've designed things to be dropped off of towers, which is really, really cool. But all of that kind of led me to a career inside telecom at Sprint, where I really got to think about how the hardware mattered to the world, right? Like when you're touching a phone, when you're interacting with a phone, what is that experience that you're starting to get? Because that happened to be right about the time that that iPhone thing really took over the world, we really started putting a lot more emphasis on what happened inside those devices. So I got a wonderful, beautiful opportunity to understand that there's this relationship between this physical world that we inhabit and this digital world that goes with it. That was quite important to me because it's kind of led me along a winding road to where I am now. Here at Cerner, I lead a team of 8 lead designers who own the design for many of our pillar products. So these people work with people like Gavin in research, work with people across various facets of our company to really understand what we want to do and how we want to do it, so that we can create more delightful products. It's that thing that we love to do, right? It's really exciting because for me, what I've seen really happen is my design problem change. I once made physical things or figured out how to put something into space, be it real or not. Now I think about how people fit into their space. I get to think about the way that everyone brings their own genius to a problem and how they solve problems together. So it's become this really wonderful change, but a really cool way to see my design career evolve. And it challenges me every single day. So that's kind of how I got to this moment and hopefully why I'm interesting. Um,
Justin, you have to go back and answer Gavin's question. What is the thing that looks like an alien probe?
the thing that looks like an alien probe, is that the IQ or the white one?
Gavin?
There we go. I couldn't get off mute.
Of
The
design.
white thing with the thing on the end. My God, that's terrifying, and I love it.
Wait until you have orthopedic surgery. That is a
Uh-huh.
scope that we designed that was able to, well, it was, I'm not sure, I don't recall if it was one of the first digital ones, but through a horrible marriage of some off the shelf equipment, some user interface that we got from China, and a bit of hardware, we interfaced a digital camera with an endoscope so that you could take live video of what your procedure was, upload it to a computer, and email it off to the world. And when we
Very
were doing
cool.
this probably 12 or 15 years ago, it hurts to say that out loud. Um, the endoscopes that existed in the world were very large, very expensive things, like 50, 60, $70,000. And it was tethered to a wall. This was the first one that was really under a couple hundred. And you could use all of the equipment that goes with the big machines on the little machines. So you could do portable exams. You could do a lot of portable work that way.
Wow. Very cool. I'm sure that they were thrilled with that, just thinking about the cost difference there.
They were, and if you want to ask about how I learned about how stainless steel actually works with plastic housings, we should save that for another talk.
Fair enough.
Coincidentally, one of the cooler physical objects I ever designed was this IQ thing over here. That is a cranial facial reconstruction drill. It's smart. So when you put the bits in it, each bit was individually coded in a magical proprietary way. It knew exactly what you're going to do with it, and then would set each screw into the target material, aka bone, to a thousandth of an inch every single time. So neat stuff that I don't do. All right.
Very cool.
Other questions about my portfolio?
Stay away from my head with that drill, man.
I am not certified to operate that drill, nor can I afford that drill. Don't worry. All right. So what have I learned? What have I learned as a contributor and as a designer to this point? I've learned a couple of important things. So when we look at the way that we design objects, the way that we work with our teams, everything we get basically exists on the left hand of the screen. It's this big hairball knotted thing that we usually get. Sometimes it's that idea of a requirement. Sometimes it's that idea of the need that we want to meet for the business or for a user, but it's a wad. UX exists to take that wad and straighten it out into a straight line so that we can actually do something with it. We bring order to the chaos. We bring meaning to these things. We as professionals are here to help smooth out some of this hot mess and really make the unobtainable understandable. We do that through design activities of iterations and sketching and drawing. We do this through research activities by seeking to understand. We do this through constantly iterating through our ideas. But we as a body are here to bring meaning to that hairball. That's one of the important things that I've really picked up kind of as I traveled this world. And there's loads of processes you can layer upon that. But what we do in that is really negotiate and converse and traverse that mess. As a predominantly captive designer, I've almost always worked in a corporate world, except for a few brief instances of independence. I've learned that the business is always bringing rules. They have rules. They have rules for good reasons, right? They have the architecture that we have to work in. They have various processes that we need to follow. They might be orientated to convert customers because that really drives into what their metrics are, or they might have some other set of metrics that they're working with. But all of this stuff that's driving their perspective is as dear as it is to us what a pen or pencil or what that user experience is. From their perspective, those numbers and things are key. They want to improve them, they want to change them, they want to reflect them positively. We designers have similar metrics. We want to increase our satisfaction. We want something to be more pleasurable to use. We want something to be more enjoyable to our user. We want it to be easier, more efficient, occasionally even delightful, right? But our metrics just use different words. This is the rules that we bring into the conversation, right? And if we keep these two things separate as fiefdoms, then what you usually get is an experience that you did not anticipate. I think this is probably one of those great memed UX images where you see that sidewalk and you see the path that didn't go the other way. But I want you to think about this in a little bit different way. It's not that the two parties didn't consult each other. They obviously did. There's paths, there's fences, there's walls, there's stuff. There's green things here that would make this a delightful experience. But there's an experience that was crafted in this moment that none of the parties who were consulted thought about. So as we're building these experiences, there's always something being created from it. If we're on it and we're doing our diligence, we have a great hand in that. We can shape that experience. If we ignore it, we're still defining that experience, but we don't know necessarily what that outcome's going to be. And for me, that's really where those two pieces come together to reflect each other. If we're not balancing that equation, then you're going to get a sidewalk like this. Obviously, for several users who walk through here, it's fine. It's a minor inconvenience. We do that. I would have to do a sweet slide on my bicycle to make it through that thing, as many of the people who have used this do not. So this is really a meaningful thing to me to consider when you're looking at what it is that we put out there in the world. So how do we actually go make these great things? I bet each and every one of you has a great idea. Have a fabulous thing that you want to design or that you have that will completely revolutionize the business that you're working in or the client that you're working for, right? I know I do, but I've been told that as I management now, they don't matter. So I have to rely on other people. When we're engaged in these processes, we are here to add balance to the equation, right? The business has their goals. They have things that they need. They have things that they want to achieve. They want their product to sell. The user exists on the other side of that equation. It has things and desires that they want to do, right? They want to buy an iPhone. They want to look for a car. They want to pay their taxes. They want to do something, but they may not be always engaged in it incredibly well. So as we're kind of thinking through the way that this exists in the world, this fulcrum can move based upon a bunch of different actors. If our product happens to be skewed too heavily towards the business, then it doesn't take too much for them to impact the experience of the product and the outcome of everybody involved, versus one that is skewed too far to the UX or the user side, where our business is always jumping at the next greatest thing and never really studying the problem. We as UX practitioners can balance this. So we can add additional metrics to safeguard the business, or we can add additional insight to the user by studying how they're actually using the product. So that the thing that exists out of all of those outcomes makes sense and everybody benefits, right? Ultimately, you and I are all here to have jobs, to make the business successful, to really make sure that what we're doing is fruitful and gives us delight. But we're here for mutual benefit, right? By adding some of the tricks that we have, some of the things that we know, we can make sure that everybody benefits from that. One of the ways that we've had great success doing this is by really inviting everybody into our mess. We do a lot of the traditional design methods. We have fabulous researchers that get in front of a problem and understand what are your motivations to use this product? What are really the psychological and the deep needs that you have for writing a note or picking a new device or shopping for some new object, right? We journey map, we do card sorts, we do all those traditional things, but we don't do them alone. We never do them alone. When we're inviting people into our process, we're inviting the business, we're inviting the engineers, we're inviting people that don't really understand how this works and often refer to us as the kids that sit in the corner with the crayons, right? We're here to make this thing real to them, but also to get their fingerprints on it. As we start getting their fingerprints on it, we start building those relationships. We start getting them to understand why we might push for that button to be just a little bit bigger when it's already there. It's blue. It mostly does buttony things, right? But that little bit more is something that, at least in our world, absolutely has to happen because of the relationships that we put together. Those relationships give us the leeway to actually iterate pretty darn constantly. on everything we do. We kind of have two different ends of the design spectrum. We have the big vision of what if we took all these things and swirled around and had infinite money and could go that way, right? We use those as vision, as flagpole to say, hey, that's generally a really wonderful idea. Let's go that way and talk about that thing. But in order to get there, we have to iterate all the way through it. We have to understand if the changes that we're wanting to put together make sense. We have to understand if that change made sense to the next change. We have to keep looping this all the way through forever, and sometimes falling short of what we wanted to do. But that compromise and that iteration is what keeps us moving forward. Out of very personal thought, I was kind of putting this together and thinking through how I might explain this. My wife and I have two very large children. As you saw by the pictures, they were taken from a mile away. That we have to put a lot of effort into understanding their needs. We have to put a lot of effort into really making sure that they have the tools and processes available to them. And we really just try to make their life 5% better with every choice. That's better than it was. It's better than it was yesterday. But with each movement forward, we keep moving the bar. That really is how I do a lot of my iteration with the teams that I work with the product managers, with upstream marketers, with anyone who comes at me that's mad about some UX-y thing. Something's not blue enough, or it's not fast enough, or there's not enough white space in it, or there is too much white space in it. Cool. We can work on that. We can work on that together. But we're making it better than it was yesterday, and we're pushing it forward to a new place where it's never been before. That all really fits into this. I don't even know if it's a life credo anymore. I don't know if it's just the way I am, but it's this idea that the UX is a very democratic, a very messy, a very rich trade. It's not designed by committee. It's not the absence of choice. But when it's done and shared, kind of like those great communal meals, that's when you really get that rich experience out of UX. That's when you're having a lot of fun designing with an engineer who doesn't know how to do any of the things that we do, but knows how to make that thing work really well. Inviting people into our kitchen is really what makes UX magical. And the more that we can avoid that coming down from the top of our mountains or going off and creating this beautiful art piece that can never see the light of day, the more that we're going to be successful as tradespeople, but the more that we're going to be successful driving our design forward and actually achieving that vision that we set out there. I use this thought quite a bit in my day-to-day because it's easy to say, I have a special thing, I have a special process that goes with that, and my decisions are infinite. We are not Design Moses. We will never be Design Moses. We do not live upon mountains. We live in the Midwest. We need to continue to make the thing that we do awesome because it's something that we're willing to share. And now, for a closing thought. I think one of the best things about being able to practice UX, I think one of the best things about being able to practice in a giant corporation like we have, aside from the challenge of what it is that we do, it's the access to so many different people and so many different perspectives that I can bring into my process and help them understand my worldview to make the thing that they need to do more successful. I think the core of everything that we do is try to include the peoples in all of the conversations. And that's what's made some of our biggest efforts go fast and go far. It's that sense of community and that sense of just bringing them all in. So with that, I'm done with my pretty pictures and I have big questions for you to ask me.
Justin, I'm going to jump in a little bit here. So we got some folks being shy in terms of the chat, but I think there were some really, really interesting points. And I know we've had some conversations about things over time, obviously over the last couple of years, that are worth just getting your thoughts on, I think, a little more detail. Specifically, inviting people into the kitchen, collaboration is absolutely essential to it. So this is actually a two-part question, or just for you to elaborate on. One, how do you get those people comfortable with ambiguity, right? Engineers work in a space, business people work in a space where ambiguity and creativity is not necessarily at the top of the list for how they have to work through problems. So first question within that, or something to maybe talk a little bit about, is first, how do you get them engaged, right? What have you found that's worked to get them engaged? But the second thing with that, and it goes back to the point when you were saying this is not designed by committee. Once people do get comfortable, there's a tendency to be experts, right? They want to give their opinion, which is fine. How have you gone about managing that so it doesn't turn into design by committee?
Okay. Two great questions. And if I missed them, I wrote horrible notes that I might scratch out again. So getting people engaged who are shy or not good with the abstract. I think one of the great ways that a good friend of mine has shares with me is that if you start talking to people about just the way that they're thinking about the problem or the thing that we're trying to solve, or really even understand what their problems are, that starts to open up their worldview of the thing that you're trying to do in kind of a tangible way, right? Like an anecdote, if you would. Back in my telecom days, we were trying to figure out a way to make the activation of a phone more delightful. There's nothing delightful about the activation of a phone. It's a bunch of mechanical processes that happen, sort of. But as we were working through this and trying to figure out how to orchestrate this thing so it wasn't this behemoth of a monster where people staring at their phone for 30 or 40 minutes, we started talking through what are we actually doing from a technical perspective. When your telephone connects to a mobile network, it does all sorts of magical things like figure out what its identity is, figure out what properties for service it has, figure out what your roaming is, figure out if you can text people, etc. And it's doing that over the course of a period of time. None of that has to be explained in a UI. None of that has to be explained to the user, except it's working. When we kind of hit that realization, we were talking with one of the lead and quite possibly principal engineers on the product that was trying to get us to understand that this has to happen for 45 seconds. Okay. Why does it have to happen for 45 seconds? Well, there's this server that talks to this server, satellite style into such and such. There's fallback, and you have to do all these things. Cool. How often does it go wrong? Oh, not very often. If it does go wrong, what happens? You can't do anything. Sweet. So I know my rules now, right? Like this NASA satellite has to talk to that NASA satellite, and the two of them in harmony will make it able for me to send a text message. That period of time is a beautiful 45-second window where I have your captive attention to explain something like how you set up accessibility on your phone, or connect to Wi-Fi, or here's a sweet video about some service that we offer, right? It's a period of time that doesn't have to be explained, but solves a very functional problem to somebody trying to operate a mobile service that absolutely has to happen or you're going to have a bad day. But by looking at what they were trying to do, we were able to pull pieces from further down the line up and remove time from the process by overlapping. That started by understanding how they were looking at the problem. Looking at some of the more recent problems as a great example. Trying to figure out how to send the message in just the right way so you only send it the right way without annoying somebody if you send it the wrong way. That sounds like a Dr. Seuss rhyme. That is the modern EMR. We have kind of this symptom of sending too many messages at a time and causing people to ignore them all. That alert fatigue that you read about, right? But didn't necessarily have a scheme to manage them in a way that ratchets down that noise, but still gets the critical stuff through. And there's some mundane stuff in there we got to tell you too, they could actually say. By kind of understanding where that is and that things are just like at full blast, you can start thinking about, okay, what kind of scheme do we need to have an inbox? Or
Right.
is there a way that I can push all of that other stuff off the board and only make the really high, really critical things pop up to the top of the board, right? Those 3 sentences are easily 2.5 years of work, and they have been. Um, but they help you to understand the problem and kind of how you got there and how you might navigate out of it. The UX and the UI work in both of those is quite minimal. The understanding of all of the architecture and the systems that go with it is very much a UX architecture problem, is very much an engineering problem, and is where the majority of that work is. All right. Design by committee. How do you keep this from being designed by committee? It's hard. Hard to keep things from becoming designed by committee. But one of the things that we have done a lot is roles, responsibilities. We have certain people who their only role is to advocate for our end user, and in our Cerner case, a very specific end user with very passionate views of the world. And there are other people that are really just there to keep us in sanity. We call them project managers and engineers. And between the two of them, we kind of have this really nice relationship of pushing and pulling on what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And because of the relationship that we've built, we all have the ability to throw the flag on each other and kick something out. Like, it would be super great if y'all would get off your butts and design a super duper table that would do all of these things and fix this for me. That's really cool. We talked about that last month. Remember, it still takes this much money to do that, and we have to change all those other things, right? We would love to help you advocate for that. We can't fix that here. Or, yes, we do hear you, and yes, your perspective is valid, but we're going to use this by more people. How do you think they might use that? One of the tactics that I have shamelessly stolen from either Brene Brown or the Multipliers book, we'll just give it to Brene Brown, is that idea of reversing roles. So if Ryan, who is often of this mindset, very much locked into a certain idea, wants to go a certain direction, this is the way that we do it, and it absolutely needs to be blue. If we're at loggerheads, a great technique that I've used for that is to flip it. And then I will argue for Ryan's perspective and he must argue for mine. So if we can then see how the other people are looking at it, we can understand that the blue button doesn't have to be blue. It could actually be 40% gray or something. I don't do UI. That's why I have people like Ryan around me.
We've got the question, what space do you design in Cerner, physical product or digital?
We are digital. We do physical objects, but I've never seen one of the people that do that. And I don't think they actually exist.
They're hidden in one of the many campuses scattered around the world.
Probably. They are on that UX mountain, perhaps.
Question for you then, also, I think that's probably worth building on as you were talking about this. Learning a new language is tough, right? And I say this coming out of anthropology and, you know, my weird background. And one of the things that is a striking thing when you leave academia and go into the business world is learning to speak with MBAs is like going off to Borneo or what have you for the first time, right? You have a lot to take in. From the perspective of design, how important do you think it is to get comfortable with the language and the perspectives of business, and how much work goes into getting comfortable with that world?
I think it's very much a when in Rome sort of an idea. You should familiarize yourself with the terms, the nomenclature, kind of the style of thinking, whether or not you're in a very metric heavy environment or a very picture heavy environment. you should familiarize yourself with those things because that helps you understand how to reach people, but also reach them on their language. I have hesitated to become an expert in any other person's trade because I don't want to steal their spark. But what I do is ask them to teach me, ask them to share that with me. Hey, that's a really cool statistic that I have no idea what that means. Explain that to me and tell me how you got there, because that seems like that could probably apply to a bunch of other things, right? It's it's letting them share a bit of what's happening in their kitchen also. So kind of bending over the line a little bit, if you would, because you start to understand just enough of the way that they're facing the world to help them by bending some of yours to that. So like incorporating some of their ideas or some of their ideals. Um, but it very much shows that you respect them and that you want them as part of that conversation, right? If I learned to code, I would probably be obnoxious. But if I learned to code, I would probably not have as many opportunities to lean over to somebody who's an expert in their field and say, that was really awesome the way you did that. It looks really hard. Tell me more about that. Versus like, oh yeah, your HTML is totally elite. That's awesome. Um, I think I myself that yeah, I like to rely on other people's sparks for those visions and insights.
Fair enough. We got a question from Tom here. Do you have stats or examples on the success or failure of products in light of practitioners understanding business needs versus not understanding business needs?
I'm familiar of one very recently in a large initiative that we've undergone for the last 18 months by being really in the same room with a lot of our business leaders, a lot of our engineers, a lot of our product owners. We as a UX team have cut the churn on what went to engineering and through engineering by 60 to 70%. So when we speak of churn, we mean rework, or we mean things that we started with. This is the idea, and out the other side, it doesn't work that way because it wasn't based on the rules of physics. Um, we cut that by upwards of 70%.
Wow. So flipping that on its head a little bit here, which is the second part of Tom's question. Where's an example of the risks and failures that we see out there, or the successes? What are the issues when business leaders don't understand user needs, and when they forego the advice of their designers?
Um, I can think of a very specific, very painful, personally example. Um, in telecom, there is a need to show you how good your service is, right? It's a big coverage map. Tells you about your coverage, tells you how awesome it is or how awful it is. So you know you need to buy a new house or a new phone. One of the things that I was tasked with many years ago was making it more brandy. So the designer before me had done a lovely job of making it very, very data concentrate and very, very understandable. It looked like a Doppler map, but I could tell you down to a street level where people were having good service and not having good service, right? To look like a Doppler map, it literally looked like a Christmas tree had exploded on the screen. But it was incredibly effective. It was proven to be incredibly effective. It was a very useful tool that people liked. Brand did not like it because it was not yellow enough. So through the course of many conversations, a few of them that caused me to die a little inside, we made a more yellow chart. Um, for reference, there's 3 yellow colors that you can actually see next to each other. There are no 17 yellow colors that you can see next to each other. So it looked very yellow. We rolled it out despite my best protests, and nobody could understand it, and our call volume went up because nobody could understand where they had service or not. They couldn't understand when they got the new phone, if that worked,
Right.
their old phone, if that worked. The beauty and magic of that Doppler map was gone because the business really, really needed to sell a brand. One of the approaches that we could have taken at the time was to say at particular levels of fidelity, it's a very brand statement, right? At a national view, yellow, fabulous across the continental United States. At anything lower than what you would look at in Kansas, it's time for a Doppler map so I can actually see if I get service in Hayes, right? That was a proposal that was shot down because it was too complex. That caused us to kind of uncomfortably slide back, but it did give us the opportunity to talk about how much information we were trying to show to a non-technical audience in a very public-facing forum. That was positive out of it. So we did gain from that. But ultimately, I counted it as a personal failure because I didn't really meet the need of the business, and I definitely didn't meet the need of the user.
So we've got a question here from Catherine. Could you speak a little bit more on the process of bringing people into the UX kitchen? Is there a systematized way you approach that kind of relationship building?
That is a great question, Catherine. That is a great question. My very fast answer is with bribery and gentle notions. We generally will, at least initially, what we like to do is set up mixers, set up ways to get people knowing each other, kind of introduce each other to what they do and what's cool about them and what's cool about our process and what's this thing that we're going to do, right? Some people call it a kickoff. I call it the great mingling. As we're working through kind of those initial stages, we start talking about what those processes are, what they bring to the equation. Some people have seen design sprints or have had colleagues that have talked about them. Some people have seen what we've done through the form of research or have heard about it. Some people just heard the CEO talk about it and have no idea what we do. By sharing what we're up to, what we're going to learn, what we're going to achieve, really seeking out what they think is cool about it or what they know about the product that we're working on or the project that we're working on, it starts building that relationship of purpose, if you would. It's very helpful if you have product people that actually understand and believe that this is the right thing, even if they fully don't understand it. But that support helps. You're very quiet, Gavin.
You're on mute, Gavin.
Not anymore, I'm not. Matt had a follow-up with that with asking, are you meaning the kickoff for a new design team or project team?
Bit of both. If we are looking at a new, so like I'm going to break this into a couple thoughts. If we're setting up a new squad and we want this squad to be fairly functional with a product organization, there's a bit of mixing and conversation that happens there, right? Like, hey, here's Gavin. He's done some cool stuff, played punk music when he was young, pretty neat guy, and knows a whole lot about this particular solution. That's awesome, right? Next person, go on and so forth. If we're showing up for short and intense engagement, like we just got to really figure out how to put this table together. Hi, I'm Justin. I do these things. I know so-and-so. He's pretty funny. Gavin thinks I'm an idiot because I can't describe him the right way. And we're all going to get along, right? And then we kind of get to work. Some of those are made easier by kind of that continual effort to maintain the relationship, kind of that continual effort to nurture and know the people that you're working with. So that when you show up to do that, like quick A-team on task, everybody's kind of got an understanding of what's up. If it's brand spanking new, like we've never, ever met before, and you're really just here because you're the UX human, that gets more difficult. But a lot of the things that we've talked about understanding the problems that they're facing, the constraints that are real, what metrics they're trying to achieve, and what makes this thing successful, it helps show that we actually care, because we very much do. If we don't meet those things, we've failed. But it also helps them put their needs in front of us, and that gives us something to design around.
Question actually from Libby that I love, considering we live in a world where agile and speed define so much of what we do. So she asked, how would you help product teams plan and pull together requirements, especially when they aren't used to planning ahead?
I beat them where they are. So a couple of my colleagues around have started building forms for this, which is just formal enough that it's not scary, but maybe close. We talk about what they want to achieve, how they want to achieve it. What are the things that they do know? What are the things that went horrible last time they did this? What are the things that should be easy by face value, but scare me because I don't know about this one little thing, right? By kind of being a bit more than UX, because you start becoming a little bit of a BA, you start becoming a little bit of a project manager, but you're getting them to say all that stuff out loud. If you're really lucky in a room with other people that can tell them if it's true or not, you're able to document some of those things. It's awkward at times. We at Cerner are very early in what we call the product lifestyle management or lifecycle management. I keep calling it lifestyle, where we're thinking about a product truly from its birth to its grave and everything that happens in between. We are, as a large company, figuring this all out together, which means we're all kind of doing similar things at the same time to see if we're figuring it out right, and then like handing the hot potato off to somebody else if it fits them a little bit better. That's messy and ugly and awesome because it means we're all learning it together and we're ultimately still trying to get to the same place, right? So Libby, to your question, I think it's us saying, that's okay that we don't know what this means. What do we know now, right? We want to still build an awesome solution. What is established? What did we know last time? Do you have documentation of at all? Or at least an experience that we can go tear down or do a heuristic on to really understand what's happening, right? It's starting wherever everybody is and kind of working from there.
So interestingly enough, the question that followed that up, I think it's great. It's when trying to convince stakeholders to allow the UX component of a project ample time to do the work, have you found more success going through allies in dev or engineering, or through the business side, through the AMs, the execs, that sort of thing? Do you see a difference in how they react to the need for adequate time to do the work?
Yes, but going sideways too much has risk, right? Like if we're working with a pretty intense team that's on a pretty intense timeline and we're always going around them to their executive sponsor or whoever their leadership is and saying, there's no way they gotta do this. These guys gotta give us more time. It's ridiculous. We're undercutting that team, right? We're undercutting the people that we should be building a relationship with. It is absolutely true that we do need to do that though. We do need to ask for more time. We do need to ask for the space that we need and that they need to be thoughtful or be very, very clear about what the result is that you're going to get. If you give me 2 weeks to design a sales page, you're going to get a page that looks like it was designed in 2 weeks and was not validated. So I think it'll work versus something that we've spent 6 months on. We've done several rounds of validation on. And we have a very high confidence that the thing that we're actually going to spend $5 million and build is going to be really, really effective.
Right.
Right.
With that in mind, what have you found works in terms of aligning UX goals with business KPIs? Because sometimes those things can be loggerheads. Are there any specific things that you have found over time that work to help bring those two things into agreement?
If I recall fondly of Paul's speech or Paul's presentation, I think the two are closer intertwined than you think they might be at loggerheads. If we want to increase satisfaction, we want people to enjoy doing their taxes, then the business is probably looking at it by more people will do their taxes and therefore we will have larger volume. Those two things have a relationship to me. So I look for the ways that they can be more aligned than not. Like, we want people to call us less with problems. Okay, well, we can do that with a variety of mechanisms, including turning off the phones. But there's a bunch of different ways to achieve that. We want people to have a better experience taking care of themselves. That also will reduce that call volume. There are ways to look at what we're trying to achieve or the objectives that we've set out and the objectives that a business owner might have set before them, where we can draw the two together by seeing the connections and the bridges that we have.
Great. Next question we've got, if you're speaking to a brand new UX practitioner, what would you tell them are the primary business realities that they need to learn? And there's a right answer.
Of course there is. It's all right. I understand generally that I'm being judged at every moment. So a new practitioner, I think, will do very well if they realize a few things quite quickly. They need to actively listen. They need to not only actively listen to the people that they are reporting to or that are in their group or in their safe space, but they need to actively listen to the people that they're being asked to work with. The business is not here to crush souls. The business is not here to make horrible products. People even making decisions that we don't like aren't here to just piss us off. That's not their goal in the morning. They don't wake up and do that. But as a practitioner, we need to understand that we have a role to play in that. And at the end of the day, we're working on the business product. We're working on this object that we need to sell or we need to ship or we need to engage people in. We're trying to do that thing together. We can be friends afterwards. We can be friends during. People will be obnoxious during all sorts of situations, I've learned. But in mass, we all have that common goal, or should have that common goal. There's some people that don't. There's not a lot that we can do about that. But for the most part, if you're actively listening, if you're participating, if you're trying to do your best and trying to understand those other perspectives, not only will you be regarded well as a young upstart in the world, but you'll also be in a position to learn from a lot of perspectives and see this world before you open up of all of the different possibilities and different tactics that you might take as a professional.
Flipping that just a little bit, what would you say for business people who are learning about UX for the first time, right? You're right. They frequently don't understand research. Certainly they don't understand design. You're the guys who make things the right color. What would you say they need to take away when learning to speak with designers and with researchers and all those folks involved in UX?
I would say a very similar thing, that active listening and that drive to understand. The practitioners that are put in front of you are here to make you more successful and make your product more successful. We really don't take delight in making things different colors. We really don't take delight in putting buttons on different pages. We're trying to make stuff really, really consistent so it's easy to build. Okay, Ryan, Mike. So it's easy to build, so it's easy to understand, so that as I'm using your product, service, or object, it makes sense, right? And you sell more of them and you give me a raise at the end of the year. That's really, really why we're here. We're here just for as much of the success as you are, as we are to think about what delight means inside the design.
There's an interesting point that Ryan makes here, where he says, know that they'll meet people every day who think UX and UI are synonymous, interchangeable terms that just mean graphic designer.
We do ourselves no favors by smashing the two together in job requirements.
That's true. That is true. Have you run into issues over time, though, with explaining the differences here? There are subtle differences across the different elements within UX as a whole. Is that something that you have run into frequently, or do you think the world's changing in terms of what business people understand with the UX?
Good question. So as I think about what the way the many different things that we do is regarded, I think UX can be that big bag of everything, right? It's research, it's user architecture design. There's visual design in it. It can be graphic design. It can be front end code sometimes. It can be a bunch of different things. It's this bag that people generally understand to mean makes it not so awful to use. I think that we as professionals are going to be constantly educating on the thing that we bring to it, and that no, we're not the UI people. I am specifically not the UI people. I will tell people that loudly. That is not the thing that I do. I've got people that are smarter and better at that than I am. But we have to keep educating people if there's a difference, right? I think we have to get a bit more sophisticated as we're asking for specialists to do a job. If we're asking for a UX, UI, front-end dev, know that you're asking for a unicorn that costs a lot of money. If we're asking for a user experience designer, we're asking for somebody that understands basically schemes of things and how they make it fit together and organize. If we're asking for a visual designer or a UI designer, a visual designer understands how to make it all make sense to the eye, make the hierarchies pop, make it look and feel like it's almost an art piece, but I understand everything about it. A user interface designer is helping me understand how to take that thing, make it more real for the UI, and collaborate with the UX person so we actually get this all stuff done, right? There's a lot of different ways that we look at the stuff that we do, and that's a beautiful thing about this trade that we've chosen.
That is great. Any other questions floating around out there that you guys are dying to ask? Now's your time. Now's the time.
Yeah, I have another question. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about UX goals and the business KPIs. You gave an example, but I can't place what that example was, and it was really good. And it was an answer, or it was a solution. You're talking about from the practitioner's side. It was a solution that met both the UX goals and also the business KPIs. Can you remember what the example was that you gave?
I can, and I could probably give you another one. So if I as a business want to reduce the call volume that I receive every day, people calling me complaining about things, there's a bunch of different things that we can do to that, right? Even up to turning off the phones. As a UX person though, I want people to have a better experience when using, say, self-service tools. So I want to put effort in people understanding the documentation that I have, or the way that I might solve a problem of my own, which has an effect on that call volume because people are solving their solutions on their own, or maybe I'm not putting the problem in front of them in the first place. There's a bunch of different ways that we can attack that if we understand what that goal is. Another example could be, and this is going to be a very medically specific thing, forgive me, friends. We have a doctor who spends 5 hours every night after their shift putting their documents together and making sure that all the patients are taken care of, right? They're, not getting paid for this time. They're mad at us because we make them do that. Well, why do they do that? That's something that we need to reduce because customers will like us better. The doctors will be less mad at us. They will never be less mad at us. Doctors will be less mad at us and everyone will be delighted. Well, why are they doing that? Well, they're going to 63 different screens to make this thing happen. We're not bringing the right context together. We're making them remember everything that they're doing, which is provide them the next contextual link, or using any of this machine learning that we've got to actually provide useful next steps. They don't want the control taken away, but maybe a little bit of predictability or a little bit of a hint could help take that efficiency down. And we see, like with this last thing that we've been working on, it gets half or it gets radically changed because we're just putting something next to something else that does a really great job. If we understand what those business goals are, we understand that we want to reduce churn, we want to increase sales, we want to maximize the lightiness, 12,000. we can usually map that back to some effect that we have across the UX or UI or whatever this thing is that we design, and see how those links go together. That's really how we start building that return on UX, right? There is a connection, although not as statistically linked as probably everybody would like, but there's a connection that you can drive between the two of them, and there's a story you could tell on the proof.
Right.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. I just wonder if there's maybe an equation in there somewhere. If you look at the sort of the KPIs, and then you look at the UX goals, or is it really just the UX practitioners or the UX team making goals out of the KPIs? Is it the KPIs that are really governing the bottom line? Because I think there's always like a tussle, isn't there, between design and productivity. Like designers think design, and they think they're designers. I mean, I think this. I think my design is the thing that's going to work, right? But if I can somehow shift over to the business side of things and look at the KPIs and what's needed, or is it the KPIs that are completely going to govern? Is there an equation here or something? Do you see it like that, or is it just there's not a one size fits all?
I am not confident enough in my own awareness to say that one size fits all, but that storytelling can definitely be connected, sometimes by a great statistician, sometimes by someone in a customer experience role or a CX role, someone who's kind of looking across both of those. We call them strategists in our world, to understand kind of how that is linked to this and see that causality, see if there's causality, or if we're still drawing enough of a hypothesis that it seems right, or at least we think we see a relationship there, but it's still a hypothesis until we have more cycles. Gavin, that actually would be a really great question for us to think about and follow up. If there is a way that we could do an analysis and really connect the two in a more concrete, methodical way, because I think that resonates with the audience, right? And knowing your audience is a big key in this being successful. If there is a CEO or a major MBA that runs the thing, we need to approach them on their language, because we're probably more adverse to it or more able to do it because of the many skill sets and hats that we wear than maybe they approach us on a design front. Otherwise,
I would agree there, and there are ways to do it. There are a little squishy, but there are ways. Yeah. We've got a question here. What's your favorite thing about your role at Cerner? And what does a typical design team look like at Cerner in terms of how many people and in what roles?
My favorite thing about my role here at Cerner is that I get to connect people with their potential. I really get to see how their genius works, kind of how they bring something new and delightful to everything that they do. I also, from my vantage point, get to see how their skills overlap with other people's skills. So I can put two people together that normally would have a deficit alone, but overlap in a beautiful way, and watch them go. That delight that I get out of seeing them succeed by just getting the right nudges is really what excites me about going to work every single day. My design problem changed significantly in ways that I did not anticipate, and I really, really enjoy it. Our design team is big, diverse, and complex. we have user experience designers, we have user experience strategists, we have researchers of equal to, but no better bearded than Gavin. We have people who are really good at code. We have people who are really good at statistics. We have people that are just good at storytelling. This mishmash of different roles and perspectives, different cultural aspects, is what makes our team incredible, because we have all of these different views making something really awesome together. We have a team that is almost all the way around the planet. There's a small gap of time where there's not somebody in an office somewhere doing something cool, but we have a lot of perspectives that we're putting into our team to get those conversations going, right? It makes it a more interesting design, makes it a more interesting conversation around how this research works in Europe. It makes it a more interesting conversation when we think about the implications of gender or identity. It makes it really, really complex because there's so much new information that you've got. You can't make a simple decision. You have to take your time and really think through things. I say this perhaps a little too flippantly, but I think I mean it. We don't sell BMWs here. We organize very complex data and tell stories with that data. So someone who has spent between 8 and 16 years in school can make a decision about your life. We deal with very big, very complex problems, and a few of them are self-imposed. But the thing that we do is really cool because of that. When we look at what a composition of like a squad looks like, it's usually a lead designer. It's well, almost always a lead designer. It's a lead designer. It's a researcher. It could be a lead researcher if we're really incredibly lucky. A couple of designers, maybe a UI human, some standards people, or some expertise in that space. Bunch of product people, maybe an engineer or 12. But it's a big happy party that kind of gets together and talks about a lot of different things. Occasionally talks about the work, hangs out together, answers questions together, pushes platforms forward together. But that band of wonderful individuals with even more perspectives is what makes the product good.
This goes back a little bit, I think, to the point about your favorite thing about your role. So
Okay.
we live in a society that equates moving up the chain of command, so to speak, with success, with happiness that you're doing your thing well. But doing management is a very different thing than designing, right? And I guess the question within that is, for people thinking about moving into those roles, leading teams as opposed to being an individual contributor, what are the things you would tell them to look for in themselves, and what are the things they need to watch out for?
Okay. A great question. I would say if you're looking at management as the next logical step of your career because you're not sure where else to go, don't do it. If you're looking at management as the way that you can start putting people you know or people that have potential into better positions to do more awesome things, and your passion is in seeing what is great about them and how you can make it flourish, what you can do to bring new people in that gives something to someone else that's been struggling, or someone that's been a rock star and now you need them to teach their stuff to everybody else, you're probably going to be a pretty okay manager, I think, if not an excellent manager. The difference in my perspective of what makes you a great manager or not is if you're looking for upward mobility just because, but the people are going to be okay and I'll just keep doing the HR things, you're probably not going to have a really great time. If you're looking at it because you believe the people are more important than the thing that you're doing, you're going to have a fun, kick-ass time, and the people are going to love you for it. Or at least that's what I hope, because that's just the way I'm doing this shit. I think some of the best managers that I've surrounded myself with, or that I've seen be incredible managers of not only myself, but other people, really have that multiplying tendency to them. If you haven't read Multipliers, please go out and buy that book now. If you need it, I will mail it to you. They tend to see how people fit together and push each other forward versus pulling that stuff back to them. Those traits, that maybe even single trait, is really what seems to make someone incredibly successful.
And yes, the book is Multipliers.
Yes.
Someone was asking that. Right. Other questions out there? I hear sound in the background. I'm not sure if that's somebody jumping in or not.
It's probably Sam playing a video game.
Ah.
Sounds like there's some zombies being murdered back there.
Oh, the book by Brene Brown. Did you mention a book earlier?
Yes, Brene Brown also has a wonderful book called Dare to Lead, which I enjoyed.
Great book.
Selfishly, I learned a lot about, well, I keep saying that. I learned a lot about kind of my own style of being, but also kind of how I deal with some of the feelings that I have as a human, as a contributor, as a participant in a lot of the things that we do. And it was very meaningful to me in that regard. It was a little bit of Chicken Noodle for the Soul too, which I don't think you should read, but it was very soothing for a lot of the feelings that I had kind of from the big change that happened in my last role to this role. So it was well timed.
Any other questions out there, guys?
I can keep going on book recommendations if you want me to, but
What's the I would ask, what's life like working with research nerds? Because that's got to be rough.
fucking fabulous, man. If you could get a job where you're working with a focused researcher that does nothing but human research, do it. I don't care if it pays less. Go do it. It's fucking awesome.
Coming from the other side of the house where there is no research, it's amazing.
Right. See, second opinion, not biased at all. Working with human factors researchers, or researchers, as I like to call them, is amazing because you're getting a different insight and another view into the psyche, what drives your users. And it's not something that we can ever put our fingers on, no matter how much product research we do. We as UX people can do product research to a level, right? Like a level. They take it a level higher because they bring all of that knowledge and understanding and effort that they have put into their practice to really understand what motivates people at a very deep level, even as deep as the lizard brain deep into the equation and what those biases mean. That's not something that we can pick up without going down that discipline. Like surveys, workflows, user testing, stuff like that. Yeah, we can accomplish that, my friends, at least in a reasonable way if you figure out how to answer not many questions. They are amazing because they give you perspectives that you do not get on your own. If you can keep one of those in your working pair, so a designer and a researcher working closely together to solve your problems, there's nothing you can't solve.
Yeah, as somebody who went from a team that had a full access to researchers and people like Justin doing awesome work to supplement the visual designs, and then going to an agency that had no such resources and didn't have anything like that, I will second that there is no substitute. I mean, it's basically like shortcutting 50 or 60% down your path as a visual designer, having access to that research, because otherwise you're just taking shots in the dark and getting feedback on what doesn't work and just throwing darts, right?
You're hinting at one of my new favorite metrics that I'm polishing up a little bit. If we do all of the UX in the world and set up a very large, possibly very expensive UX team, we're still millions of dollars cheaper than building the wrong thing twice.
Twice, 3 times, 4 times.
Right, exactly.
I mean, if you don't give up and want to keep doing power orders, sure. Oh, did I say that loud? Yeah, like a really good team that understands those insights beforehand will give a really good product manager a high confidence that they're going to spend that money well, and that they're going to be able to do it again.
I think that's a great point, and I'd love to just get your take a little bit more on that. It seems expensive up front to do the research and the design and the right, because we're investing a couple $1,000 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you get it right, and the probability goes up significantly that you're going to get it, you're not pissing away millions of them, right? And I'm sure all seen that more than once, where millions have been spent developing something only to see it fall flat on its face. The Zune is a great example back in the day, right? Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I, I suppose everybody would benefit a little bit from hearing just that. How have you communicated successfully the risk involved in not doing UX, good UX work?
Simple math. So I think so. It might have been Kim. It might have been you that told me something like paying Qualtrics to do a study for us that would take 2 to 4 weeks is something like 30 to 40 grand, right? That's
Yep.
not a little bit of money, but it's 30 to 40 grand. An agile team, a fully armed agile team, is $1.2 million per month.
Big difference.
There's a little bit of difference there. So you want me to go do my UXy things where it's significantly cheaper for a while, or do you want to wait on that?